Adam Ortman is a marketing author as well as the CEO and founder of Kinetic 319, a leading marketing and advertising agency headquartered in Denver, Colorado, of all places. Also a global traveler. The agency offers full funnel marketing campaigns, fusing cutting edge practices and consumer psychology to help businesses resonate better with their audiences, which I love. So, Adam, welcome.
Thanks, Nicholas. I'm happy to be here. I'm glad you're having me on.
Now, consumer psychology, this is something that a lot of marketers forget, that marketing is basically dealing with people's emotions, not just what they need to buy at that particular time, but how do you take them through this whole journey from not knowing about the brand, considering the brand, actually purchasing the brand, and then getting them to come back, because it's obviously cheaper to get them to get a past customer back than to try and get a whole bunch of new ones. And you've worked with quite a lot of big agencies, I mean, big clients.
Mhm.
I see Kellogg's, I see Nike, amongst others, and you've also planned and managed over $1 billion worth of media. So, I mean, not many people have done that. Um, let's talk a little bit about consumer psychology and perhaps how the big boys do it. So if we look at the Nikes and the Kellogg's and companies like that, they're not just spraying money around and hoping it works. Maybe talk to me about how does a company like Nike or Kellogg's, or you can use another
Yeah.
example, look at their media buying journey when it comes to consumer psychology.
Yeah. It's one of my absolute favorite topics because not only is my education foundation built on that topic, but it's something that I actually get to see in my practice every day. And it's very, very rarely do you have one of those kind of scientific interests that you can pair into your day-to-day work life and actually see it come to life, where you are looking at theory and you actually see it in practical daily life. And
Thrilling
to your
almost.
thrilling, it is
Yeah.
very thrilling, and I think it's thrilling. I don't know about you, Nicholas, but
I do.
I
No, I
think it's
love
thrilling.
consumer psychology and marketing. Wonderful mix.
I really like this topic because, to your point, a lot of companies forget about the person, the human side of the customer business relationship. And there is a saying that I really, really like, and that is people don't do business with businesses, people do business with people. And people have their own motivations, their own priorities, their own fears, their own goals. And so understanding what makes your customer tick is only going to make that sale through life cycle that you just described, awareness, consideration, conversion, and loyalty, much more seamless and more positive for the relationship that you have with your customers. And so a lot of that comes with, how does Nike and United Healthcare and Kellogg, they're looking at behaviors. So they're not just providing a product and service and saying, hey, come buy it. They're actually saying, how does my product align with a specific person and those attributes that I just described? So the priorities, the motivations, what positive impact is my product or service providing to those individuals, and how do I align my marketing to facilitate against those? And I think that that's really, really important, and honestly a lost art in many companies today.
So, why would a company like Kellogg, for example, come to you of all people? What is the
Sure.
I mean, they are a large multinational company. I've worked on a whole bunch of Kellogg campaigns in
Oh yeah.
in my youth as well. I've seen how the product is made, so I don't eat terribly much cornflakes anymore. But
Yeah.
um, do they come to you for the entire strategy? Is it for a very particular segment of the market? We don't have to use maybe a client name, but when a
Sure.
large client comes to you, um, let's maybe talk through the process of how they engage a company like you.
Sure. Yeah. So where our specialty lies is the more of the media buying aspect. That is where we do 80% of our work. We also do a lot of SEO work. So SEO and content is the other side of my agency. And so when they come to us, when a large or mid-size or small, right? We have options across the board for all of our clients. When they come to us, they usually have a creative theme, a creative campaign already created, and they come to us because we're backing in a lot of data and a lot of audience science, or what we call audience alchemy, into our strategy, our planning, so that when we say we need to put this ad on this tactical execution at this time with these targeting parameters, that's all backed by the basically the consumer psychology that we're baking into our own strategies and planning. And what we do then from there is manage the campaigns. So when clients come to us, we are very, very, very transparent about, asking us about, do you make the ads? Do you make a website? We don't do things that we're not good at. And I think that's something that sets us apart specifically today, because a lot of agencies we do everything, which means you kind of don't really do anything. So
Exactly.
we are very good at that performance based media buying. We understand targeting, we understand the translation between human behavior and the targeting levers available in the marketing world today. And that's really why customers or clients come to us, because they want to partner with that level of rigor.
So a lot of folks might think we are talking gobbledygook. You're talking about metrics, you're talking about audiences, we're talking about, all sorts of different types of ads. Imagine you're a company that is slowly growing and
Sure.
you've never engaged a media agency before. And all you've heard about is OMD and these very expensive, PhD and all these large, expensive agencies. If only there was an ebook that could help you write a media planning brief, right?
If only there
Yeah.
was. And Nicholas, I think I might have written one.
Talk to me a little bit about that, because a big thing is people don't know where to start. It's like with
Yep.
ChatGPT. You've got the world at your fingertips, but unless you run, I was doing this with my class this morning. I said we were doing marketing planning and said, okay, go and find an example on Google of the exact plan that you're going to be doing, because I guarantee whatever you can think of has already been done. And they couldn't find it because they didn't know exactly the search terms to use. And the
The
same thing
prompts.
with
Yeah.
media buying. It helps having a bit of a guide or a starting point, especially if you've never done it before. So maybe talk through um, this ebook and why it came about, and how it could
Yeah.
be useful for people starting out.
So we have published a number of guides of books, and they're actually on sale worldwide. They're on Apple, they're on Google, they're on Amazon, they're across the board. It's really important for me, as I've been doing this a long time, and I've worked with entrepreneurs that are startups that are literally just brainstorming on the back of a cocktail napkin in a bar. And I've also stood in front of multi-billion-dollar business boards. And there, one thing that I keep coming back to in my own business and in my own career is, how do I give back and make that as accessible as possible? So we do produce our own content, and for a number of reasons. Obviously, giving back is my primary source of that work. So whether it is how to write the perfect marketing brief, or whether it's how do I really know if my social media campaigns are working, that is actually a free guide on our website, or our most recent one, which was earlier this year, which is really all about how do you increase the conversion rate of turning a lead into a sale. And so these are topics that my agency are finding as consistent roadblocks or speed bumps or questions that clients ask, indifferent of the size of their business. And so we craft the content to help tell that story, because we do know that there's not going to be a lot of businesses that can or are in that financial position yet to engage an agency like mine, but they can do a lot of self-learning. And so we produce a lot of content to help tell a lot of those stories. And I mean, our seventh book is actually coming out at the end. Nope, it's actually Q1 of next year. So gonna put a little bait in there, put a little bug in your ear on that. But we usually produce one guide a year, and it's usually coming from our own experiences, our own questions that are being asked in the space.
And I guess that's useful because a lot of businesses or a lot of entrepreneurs perhaps have started out as their first business, and they think I'm the first person that has ever asked this question. And looking at guides like this is quite good because it shows you, actually, I'm not a moron. Everyone is asking this kind of question. Even businesses
Yes.
bigger than me or who've been around longer than me are still having these challenges. And if I keep myself up to date, if I make sure I read good quality content that give me the right questions to ask, I can actually get a leg up in business.
Or they may not even understand the complexity of a topic, for example. So that was actually one of the reasons why I produced the how to buy television in the United States. Because buying television ads in the United States is completely different than anywhere else in the world. That inventory is so complex, and you have national, you have local, you have broadcast, you have network, you have now a rat's nest of streaming inventories of who the heck knows who owns this spot. So that was a really good one because I was sitting across the table from with a CMO in London, and she was asking me all of these questions about buying TV in the US, and this was for a large gaming platform. And I was describing to her how we buy TV in the US, and by even having her ask me those questions, that was a really big light bulb for me because it showed me that even you know giants in their space in other countries don't understand this. So if I'm producing content that makes it accessible for a small business owner or the CMO of a multi-million dollar gaming company, that's going to be valuable. And so that's really one of the drive, and that's literally the genesis of that of our specific TV buying in the US book.
Now, you mentioned London. You obviously travel to Europe every now and then, and
Yeah.
I hear you going to the Oktoberfest next month, which is very
Yeah.
exciting.
Did I buy
Uh,
Ladderhosen? I don't know. Maybe.
Maybe everyone should have a pair. I can't fit into mine anymore. Um, but it's quite strange. Normally, we have Europeans going to the US, etc., and Americans going to Europe is to sell media, or understanding of media is slightly different.
Yeah.
Maybe talk to me about what are you doing in the European market, and why should folks in Europe chat to you?
Sure. I am in Europe quite a bit. So I'm usually over in Europe about 4 to 6 times a year. And that's both for pleasure and for work. And so we have two clients in the UK today. We have one client in Portugal, and we're actually talking with another client in Turkey that I was actually just there back in May. So I love the European markets. I love the global space in general. I kind of look back at my past where I did a year and a half. I lived a year and a half in New Zealand. I did that right after basically my senior year of my undergrad. And that proved to me that I was able to do marketing, really good marketing work. And the foundations of my work were basically the same, indifferent of what country I was going to. And that led to that kind of consumer psychology ethos that I had even then, which led to my master's degree. So I like bringing the American strategies into European markets. Targeting is completely different. Media is completely different, and it's very hyper localized. So the US is an enormous country comparatively to other countries around the world, not only geographically, but even with our own subcultures in the US. So it's a very good case study of saying how can a company survive in the US given the large span of geographic space, but also our subcultures and how different we are across the board. That is very translatable to other countries in the world. And so we partner a lot with, for example, if we're doing billboard campaigns in Poland, for example, we will actually partner with local media companies to help us place those buys and try to get that local ingredient that we can say, hey, I don't want to just buy a digital billboard online and then it ends up in behind an overpass or a highway or whatever it is. So we do a lot of figuring out what the actual local individuals are doing, how they're living, and then we're basically building campaigns around that, just like we would in the US.
Another angle is also that there are lots of Europeans who are completely mystified, as you mentioned, about the US market. So, speaking to somebody like you, especially a lot of
There
European
is
companies
that.
are trying to
Yeah.
get into the US market, and you'd probably be a good starting point.
Absolutely. Like I said, we work with a lot of international brands that are looking to not only sell in country, but also into the US and penetrate that market, which that is really important. That was actually that CMO TV conversation that I was just referencing. That was literally that theme was we're doing good work in the UK. We're trying to penetrate the US market. One of the things that I think catches a lot of folks by surprise is just the increases in cost when you do this. Media in the US is expensive. And so, how you work with us is you're really looking for those areas of opportunity to mitigate that increased cost and balance both cost and effectiveness when you're dealing with campaign structures.
Yeah. So very useful. Now I've got to go back in your history a little bit. I see
Sure.
you lived in Wellington, or did
I
your
did. That was my New Zealand. Yeah.
course in Wellington? But I'm South African, and we beat the living daylights out of the All Blacks last weekend. So I just want to, you picked the wrong country.
Thank you, Nicholas.
Um,
Thank you for
yeah.
that.
So,
Thank you for that reminder.
so you've also got a very nice package for folks who are just starting out, your Get Moving package. And if people want to go and check that out, they can see that on your site. I think that's very useful. If you just want to see how to start out, make sure the
Please
fundamentals
do it.
are done. Have a look at that. And then the last question I want to ask you is Kinetic 319.
Yep.
Why? Is it
Why the name?
Kinetic 319? Yeah.
Kinetic 319. So it is. It
Three.
is 319. Kinetic 319. I really kind of festered on the name for a really long time, and I get is it a phone number? Is it an address? Is it? I don't know. I get a lot of questions about it, but I love my name because it tells this fantastic story. So 319 is the number of years between the start of Kinetic 319 and the first advertisement published in North America. It's 319 years. And so when you're looking at this 319 years and how critical advertising and media has been to not only the American market, but also just global commerce in general. I mean, advertising has been around since the Greeks and the Romans, so it's been around a very, very long time. But really looking at that North American time frame, that it's really about paying homage to those prior 319 years, where you're also having a very optimistic, very energetic, full of evolution, innovation, constant movement future. So you have this dichotomy of paying respect to the last 319 years prior to the agency existing, and then being very optimistic and energized about the future. And that's really where Kinetic 319 comes from. The tagline, which is, moving modern businesses forward. And that comes from this idea that if you're not moving as a business, if you're not evolving, if you're not listening to your customers, if you're not taking, your competitors into consideration, you will stagnate and die as a business. That's kind of a dark thought, but it is reality. And so businesses today can't afford to stand still, and that's really the premise of Kinetic 319.
Well, I like that you can describe your brand. That's awesome. Now, Adam, where can I send folks to read up a little bit more about you and have a look at some of these ebooks? And if they're
Yeah.
interested in getting into the European or the US market, where they can
Sure.
get in touch?
Yeah, so kinetic319.com. That's our website. We have a very robust blog. We have all of our guides on our website. Also, we do publish a lot of primary research. So we do a lot of research ourselves. We just did one for US spending trends and habits that we're expecting in 2025. This next holiday season, we actually surveyed over 500 people. So take a look at our primary research as well, because we are constantly poking at things and being very curious. Our socials are incredibly important to us. So we actually produce every week we have a tip for businesses. So it's the Stay Kinetic tips that we have every week, whether it's talking about Google targeting or what's new in influencers, or maybe a setting that you should be putting into your meta campaigns. We're releasing these once a week. So definitely follow us on socials, because that's going to bring a lot of really good tips and tricks to your companies.
Excellent. Well, I'll stick that in the episode description as well, so folks can just click
Fantastic.
on that and check out your socials. Adam, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
You as well, Nicholas. And thanks for listening, everybody.